Welcome back to Autism Acceptance Month. I'm your host, Stage 3 Sleep Deprivation Crow of the Safety Pens, and I'm here to talk to you about the link between autism and plurality. Plurals are disproportionately likely to be autistic and vice versa. Even autistic singlets will often relate strongly to plurality. So today we're going to be looking into the causes of that connection. So, first, we need to have a specific understanding of autism and plurality for this to make much sense. Autism is a neurodivergency that's characterized by monotropism, very intense and specific focuses, repetitive behaviors, and a completely different set of social skills, understandings, and needs from allistics or people without autism. Plurality is the state of not being one person in one body. This definition is based on Anglo-social concepts of personhood, though. The standard of plurality is mostly just diverging from the cultural standard of the people-to-body ratio. And that actually takes us to the first point. Singlethood is a social construct. The idea that everyone or most people are exactly one person in one body is a cultural norm. It's not an objective fact. We know this because a ton of cultures don't have our standard of singlethood. In Anglo culture, which to be clear refers to white, non-Latino, Hispanic people in predominantly English-speaking places like America or Britain, the norm is being one cohesive person with a relatively stable core self alone in your body for your entire life. But there's a ton of cultures and belief systems where this isn't the case. Many American Indians believe in two-spiritedness as being very literal, with a two-spirit person having multiple selves, spirits, and or souls. Jews gain an extra soul on the Shabbat, which Shabbat Shalom, by the way, and also generally are considered to have multiple souls as a baseline. A ton of ancient and modern cultures consider possession to be fairly standard, but in their respective cultures, these experiences aren't considered inherently plural, even though by Anglo standards, all of them are. And honestly, I personally doubt that most singlets fully line up with the Anglo standard of singlethood, just like how a lot of women don't line up with the Anglo concept of womanhood. I'm assuming that if you've heard of autism, then you know that autistics aren't known for our understanding of social norms. Actually, we're kind of known for the fact that we don't get holistic social cues and rules. So, honestly, is it a surprise that many of us have self-perceptions outside that norm? Like, this point isn't usually brought up in these conversations, partly because a lot of people believe that singlehood truly is the default, but it isn't. It's the assumption. This same concept is also why so many autistics aren't cis, too. Another reason for this overlap is masking, when a neurodivergent person hides behaviors and traits associated with their neurodivergency. Autistic masking often extends to hiding interests, not stimming, expressing emotions in an unnatural way, and forced eye contact, regardless of discomfort. Autism extends to everything about you, and hiding autistic traits often means hiding your entire self. Autistics also tend to heavily compartmentalize. It shouldn't be too surprising, then, that sometimes a mask will become their own person or entity, or that an autistic person will have multiple masks that are people. Like I mentioned, autistics are monotropic, and things like switching gears between social groups to act appropriately for the situation can be extra difficult. It can be easier to just have someone else take that over so that you don't actually have to personally switch gears. Usually, this is intentional, but some autistics also do it on purpose. This next bit I'm not getting too much into because I'm way too tired for this, but it's also worth noting that modern thought forming slash paragenesis originated in and was popularized by the disproportionately autistic brony community, and there's a reason for that. Namely, autistic people experience very intense long-term interests, aka special interests, which often include characters and media, and strongly integrate them into our senses of self, which can sometimes be very literal, such as having introjects from a special interest, which is how the other system in a body at all, the night system, came to be. Now we're getting into the reason that people do actually talk about. It's just depressing and also more medical, so I didn't want to lead with it. Here's your content warning for ableism, trauma, and different forms of abuse. Skip to the timestamp on the screen if that is triggering for you, and it's an open secret and confirmed fact that autistics are more likely to be victims of child abuse, peer abuse, or bullying, grooming, SA, and more. It's also known that plurals are more likely to be survivors of abuse and trauma, with trauma being one of the most common contributing factors to plurality. DID, which is usually experienced as plurality slash multiplicity, has strong connections to childhood trauma, and while that isn't its only cause, it's the most common one. There hasn't been a ton of research on the autism plurality correlation, and what there has been on the autism DID and autism dissociation connection. But the research we do have strongly suggests that autism can cause and be closely related to dissociation, including identity dissociation, and that the types of trauma that are most frequently experienced by autistics, such as interpersonal abuse, having to ignore pain and discomfort, being trained out of inherent traits, and masking, have a relationship with dissociated identity. But I also think it's a disservice to the conversation and to autistic people in general to only focus on that. For one, plenty of autistic plurals don't have DID and don't experience their plurality as created by trauma. And while the amount of trauma most autistic people experience definitely has a lot to do with why so many autistics are plural, I don't think that's the main reason or even the most common. Autistics are seemingly more likely to be plural in general compared to allistics, including autistics who don't have PTSD or dissociative disorders, and that can't be explained by higher rates of trauma in autistics. It's also not like autistics are more likely to be traumatized for no reason or out of bad luck. We inherently function differently on a lot of levels, and a lot of those functions can be connected to plurality much more clearly than trauma, in my opinion. Like, let's just go into a few. Autistics are better at pattern recognition than allistics and have more attention to detail. An autistic person might be more likely to realize that they're already plural because of this, since the signs of being plural are much easier to identify analytically than emotionally. Discovery is usually based on analyzing a pattern of behaviors and symptoms, not feelings. Autistics tend to be generally more creative than allistics, including in conscious problem solving and subconscious coping skills. Autistic brains can come up with a lot, and an increased predisposition to coming up with things probably lends itself to the formation of new identities and personalities. Autistics are also, because of this, more likely to consciously consider plurality, including the idea of becoming plural by choice. Autistics also tend towards nonlinear thought and make many shorter connections in various directions instead of fewer longer ones along the same route. This can manifest itself as multiple thought processes at once or overlapping, something that lends itself to internal dialogue. Autistic personalities tend to be less flexible, and when flexibility is needed, autistics tend to build entire processes around acting flexible rather than adapting in a more normal way. For a lot of reasons, autistics tend to be lonelier, and being surrounded by other autistics, either in or out of your body, can certainly help that. Autistic plurals who have to or choose to engage with a variety of activities will often have members more specifically designated to activities whose monotropic focus is on one or two things instead of individuals having to divide their attention, which is often much more productive and comfortable for them. Things like that feel much more relevant both to why so many autistics are plural and to understanding plurality in autistics. And they also, in my/our opinion, acknowledge the autistic predisposition to plurality as something that isn't inherently negative and exclusively born from trauma, but instead a neutral and often positive feature of autistic minds. So that's the video. If you have thoughts, especially if you're an autistic system, we'd love to hear them down below. You can also join our Discord server, the link's in the description, and of course, like and subscribe if you want to do that. Next week's topic is going to be vaguely birthday related, since next Saturday's our birthday, but we haven't decided exactly what to talk about yet, so I guess you should subscribe and hit the bell for that. Okay, bye.